hope you enjoyed this episode of Audio Signals Podcast, hosted by Marco Ciappelli. If you learned something new and this conversation made you think, then take a moment to rate this show and add it to your favorite podcast player. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and share this episode with your friends, family, and colleagues. We invite you to come back for more stories and follow Marco Ciappelli on his social media as he continues musing on stories, storytelling, and storytellers.
Hello, everybody. This is Marco Ciappelli. Welcome back to Audio Signal Podcast, where we talk about stories and those that write or create those stories. As you know, I like to say we're all made of stories. And it's not just books, it's not just writing, it's actually any form of creative endeavor that, for me, it's telling a story. You can be a photographer, you can be a painter, you can be a filmmaker, or like in my case today, my guest, you can be a musician. And Jonathan Taylor is on the show with me. He has a career that spanned many, many years, a lot of achievement, and he's a classical guitar player. And he is going to share with me, I guess, what is the connection between music, what he does, what he has done, and storytelling, sharing stories and capture emotion in the people that listen. So enough with me talking. Jonathan, I'm so happy to have you on the show, and I love music, so
thank you.
I'm very excited about this conversation.
Same here.
Perfect. So how about we start with my favorite question: who is Jonathan? A little bit of go as back as you want.
Okay. I'm a classical guitarist that started at a very young age, 10 years old. And I have a large solo classical guitar catalog, 32 albums, 325 tracks that contain music, not only the masterpieces, which one would expect, you know, the Chaconne, Leyenda, the Spanish masterpieces, Bach, etc., but also transcribed heretofore never adapted music to the solo classical guitar. For example, I adapted the film score of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which kind of a magnum opus reduced to its components. And another film score is the James Bond themes or American folk songs from the 19th century, Stephen Foster. Also music from many different genres. So I've just mentioned film score, but also take the old psychedelic pop songs and adapted them, believe it or not, in coherent arrangements. And I have done that. That's actually predicted that I would do that many decades ago, and toured all over the world, toured in all sorts of strange places. Not just, you would think Europe and America for a so-called classical musician, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I toured in the Amazon, in the Philippines, Romania, India. In other words, I even have on my app that you told me you downloaded. You can, if you want the Jonathan Taylor app, it's free. Just type Jonathan Taylor, no break in the name, in Apple Store or Google Play, depending upon your phone type. And it's a free app for you. There's a series there called Adventures in Touring, which means what? Well, when you step out of your house and you go into the world, you're going to have adventures, whether you like it or not. You're going to have all sorts of things happen. And so I've been recording over 30 years to compile the catalog that I just mentioned. And I'm right now filming here in Orange County, or having filmed of me, performance videos on my YouTube site, JT Classical Guitar Mastery. There's over 200 videos of me playing, different pieces. And so that kind of is a brief intro.
Well, it's good enough for me to start the conversation, that's for sure. Many questions already that I had in my mind
Sure.
to start asking you, but I want to start again from the beginning. So your story is, you say you started to play when you were 10 years old?
In all truth, 100% disclosure, is I really started playing when I was 4, but they don't put that in the bio because it's not believable. It sounds like a bunch of BS.
Well,
but when I was about 4, I would take a ukulele, because my little fingers, right?
Right.
And I would run around the house and sing and pick out tunes. My grandmother was a silent film organist. So therefore, I had that influence in the background.
Cool.
People say, "Why do you think you became that?" And I go, "Well, I think that you kind of absorb all that music, you imbue it or burnish it into you just because it's in the environment."
Mm-hmm.
So my grandmother played in the time period of all the stars, that silent film era. Charlie Chaplin. She did many gigs with Harry Houdini, gigs with Lon Chaney Sr., Man of a Thousand Faces, etc., the Keystone Cops, Charlie Chaplin, etc., as I said. And so I kind of have, that musical legacy or background heritage.
So I know a few stories about that, and many people, I think the younger generation don't think in that way. But when there was no music in the movies, a pianist and an orchestra sometimes will play, or the
That's
organ,
right.
in your case, will be in a movie theater,
Sure,
playing that music for you live. So imagine the treat that, it's a live concert pretty much while you're
every
watching.
night.
I know, it's amazing.
Every night, and I'll give you an example. So everyone knows who Houdini is, even as a historical figure. But he's revered by magicians and the public, renowned for 100 years, right? So think about him getting in that tank with those chains on. Oh, he's going to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the suspense.
Right.
And she would be going, da, 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 to dramatize, yeah, he's been in there 4 minutes, and so, I mean, that was the environment. Also, I'll tell you something about Houdini. He was so good. He was a tremendous showman and a great locksmith, right? He would hide the wire in his hair because he'd be naked in a cell. The police department in Milwaukee or whatever would say he can't break out of here. And so his show stunt would be he'd hide a wire in his hair, because his body would be naked. He's got something in his pocket, right?
Wow.
So many times when Houdini would come down to LA, he got a contract for a film to stay in LA for 1 year, and he hated it. And the reason I'm telling this story is to show you he was so popular. He would fill those auditoriums in the Pacific Northwest, East Coast, wherever the hell it was, Indiana, Central, the center part of America. And they gave him a contract for 3 films in LA. I can't remember who it was, RKO or Lowe's or one of the old studios. And he hated it. And why is that? There's actually a house in LA that he rented for a year, the studio rented for him, that you can go see because, they try to put on seances and all sorts of stuff during Halloween. But they rented that house and he did the films. And why did he hate it? Here's why he hated it. Because he was so popular, he could fill those auditoriums. And he made a ton of money doing that. And when he was with the films, they didn't make that much money. He was strapped to that daily schedule of, filming and doing that. And so it's just an interesting thing. So my grandmother, who came down to Los Angeles from the Pacific Northwest, originally from South Dakota, she opened the theater there on Wilshire Boulevard for Mr. Fox. And Mr. Fox, as he was starting his 20th Century Fox studio, actually owned the Orpheum Circuit, which was the silent film and vaudeville venues that people would do. Charlie Chaplin was a vaudevillian. That's what he did in England before he came over here and started doing films with Mack Sennett. So that's just a little history of, some of the performers she played with. And, you get to know them well because think about Lon Chaney Sr., Phantom of the Opera, right? Mm-hmm. That image. I go, well, he would be there on a red carpet premiere in Minneapolis or Grauman's Chinese in LA, something, right? Wherever it was. And what would you do? I go, well, the whole, the dancers would be there, and then there'd be my grandmother, then there'd be, Harry Houdini or Charlie Chaplin or Lon Chaney or the Keystone Cops or Ed Wynn or Harold Lloyd, all those people of that time period who were the glitterati, so to speak. And then, of course, talkies came in and things changed, right?
Yep. Yeah, there's been a movie about that as well. Movies that explain how things really got different, and that's why I wanted to share with the audience this piece of story, because if people are interested in movies or in any other kind of art, it's not always been the same, especially when technology change. I like to talk a lot about technology and society in my other podcast, as people that follow me knows, but it's really been a driver for a lot of changes, and even now with streaming and AI, we can go there. But
sure.
I know that you've been one of the first artists that actually jumped on the digital way again.
In the 90s.
Right? Tell me about that.
Sure. I had friends. My first album was analog, of course, on an LP, on a, vinyl. And after that, there's, tapes and CDs and so forth, 8 tracks, and then also other audio tape formats. But then digital starts to creep in. Now, at that time, I was considered more of a classical musician. I'm really a crossover artist with all the different styles and that I do. And we'll talk about that later. But with regard to the digital stuff, here's what happened. So analog has a warmer sound than, let's say, the cold metallic sound of digital. Now, some people don't like that. There were artists that would refuse to record on digital media. And at that time, they had direct-to-disc digital stuff. They had all sorts of beginnings, right? All sorts of ways that they began that. And somebody would say to me, Jonathan, this sound is not as warm. I go, but it doesn't matter. You don't live in the 18th century. You don't have a powdered wig and stockings, and you don't dress like George Washington. You live in the 21st century. You live now. So you're trying to, I believe, new technology. AI, for example. When people say, what do you think about AI? I go, it's one of the greatest upsides and one of the greatest downsides that humankind has ever created. I go, I think it'll be way more significant than atomic energy. And I go, it has an upside that you can find out, you can map proteins in the body with AI in minutes, where it would take a man 5 years. And so medicine will have a tremendous upsurge. And what's the downside? I go, you don't know what is real. You don't. And doesn't Drake have a lawsuit with one of the record companies because they AI'd some of his material or something? I think there's something like that. And people say, what do you think AI will do to the music industry? I say, a lot of lawsuits.
Yeah, but I think you're going in that direction where you are the kind of musician and artist that, beside the fact that when people think about classical music, again, you may think into a Mozart with a wig and playing on the clavicembalo, but you actually saw that technology was changing things. Maybe maybe your grandmother saw that one when the
I'll tell you, she died right as the time I should put her in the ground
right.
when she was 101.5 years old, and she died just at the time it was coming out. And I'll tell you something: when the first MP3 site, this is even before Napster, was in San Diego, I was the number one artist on it, and number one download in that. And people say, "Oh, isn't that good?" I go, "I didn't get a penny," and I go, "It'll destroy the music industry," and it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because everybody downloaded everything for free. So all the artists that made money from their albums, like Kiss and all the pop groups and that, I go, oh, that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
That's a vestige of history now.
Yep.
So what is the streaming done? I go, well, it's made available. I always say follow the money and who's making the money. And the artist now makes a fraction of a cent per stream.
How do you feel about the opportunities, right? So I am more on the writing world, and I can say, on the creator world, and everybody can display and create art, right? Movies with an iPhone, you can film. I mean, you can do graphic design, of course. Now there is AI, so you don't know who really did that or not. And music, I mean, I played with AI that create music, and it come out pretty good. But again, it's not a masterpiece, in my opinion. I don't know if it ever will go there because it doesn't have the emotion that you put into the music. So I want to go.
I believe AI will take us to many places, but I also believe that one human being, whether they're playing the cello, the violin, the classical guitar, the piano, whatever, is not ever going to be destroyed or put on the shelf. And the reason why is any computer can play more accurately or faster than any human being, but there's nobody there. And what you really want is that musical experience. That is what's important. I'll give you an example. There was a great, and still is, a great Asian cellist, I won't mention his name, who all his life thought, I've got to play perfectly. I've got to play perfectly. Well, as he got into his 60s, he said, you know what? That's the most boring performance I ever heard. I need to focus on the experience. And his playing opened up. So in other words, it is not that you're perfect. It's not. When people say, oh, you played that perfectly, I say, I don't want to be perfect. Because if I'm perfect, that means I can't grow. And it means I can't change. And I go, if I think the same thoughts at my age as when I was 21, I've wasted a lot of years because I haven't acquired something to put me on a larger path, a bigger panorama.
Yeah. I agree. I see a lot of difference between those musicians that are amazing, they're technical, they can play anything they want, but I'd rather get, a Jimi Hendrix that is not trained, but it put a lot of passion and a lot of invention in his music. So my way of saying things is not really how you play, what you play, but is how you play it. You put a piece of yourself into that. And I want to connect with what you say. You've done a lot of adaptation. And so when you change one piece of music into kind of your own interpretation, what happened there as an artist?
Well, now there's one part that you're arranging. And okay, so one level of understanding that is you're adapting a piece from the piano or from orchestra or whatever to this kind of, as Segovia used to say, a miniature orchestra in itself is the classical guitar. And also, you're adapting whether that fits. And some things don't fit. It's like chemistry. There are some elements that do not combine.
Right.
They do not combine. Now, the noble gases are complete in themselves and do not want to combine with anything, so to speak. But other elements do want to combine. So it's like that. And it's part of that is how is nature? I'll give you an example of what I mean in a very abstract way. So nature directs things whether we know it or not. And I'll give you an example. I was extremely surprised years ago when they sent up the Cassini probe to Saturn to find out they took the light waves from the rings of Saturn and translated them into pitches. Because, they're just frequencies, right? One's a light frequency, one's a sound frequency. And I found out that the planet Saturn hums to an A minor chord. Now, what the hell does that mean? And I say, what it means is that the major minor system is a part of nature. And we derive from nature that system and then kind of direct it the way our minds are and that. But I go, there it is. Nobody knew that was going to happen. And I go, the major minor system is literally part of nature.
That's really cool.
Talk about music of the spheres, right?
Makes me think about Vivaldi right now.
I love Vivaldi. I heard a performance of the Seasons there at the church that he worked at. I stayed at the Metropole in Venice, which
that's a treat.
It's a wonderful, wonderful hotel. But that used to be part of that church and used to be the quarters of Antonio Vivaldi. And then the other church is right alongside it, next to it. Because the configuration was different and mixed-use buildings, right? They're different than way back then. But, and it was a wonderful virtuoso violinist playing. He's great. And I really love Venice. And you're from Italy, so you ought to know. I love Venice.
Yeah, it's
incredibly
I think
beautiful.
Venice. The only problem with Venice is the same problem with Florence and Rome. Is like you don't get to see the real city because it's so packed with tourists all the time.
Oh, that's true.
And it's like going to a museum. My dream is to be able to go in a museum at night when nobody's there. And the few times that I found myself in a museum, even the Getty here in LA, on a downtime where I turn around, I'm like, oh my God, I'm the only one in this room looking at this piece. It's a different experience. It's so
true.
much more poetic and
I agree.
And meaningful.
Right.
So,
right.
But yeah, Venice definitely inspired music.
And Venice is a great place to get lost in those streets with your girlfriend.
Literally.
With your lover. To get lost in the streets of Venice because you have no idea. I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful. And then stop at a cafe and, have some food. I tell people that you've never had a tomato until you've been to Italy. You haven't even eaten a tomato in your life unless you've been to Italy. I go, the first bite of that tomato, I thought I could live off the nutrition for 5 years,
That's amazing.
Exquisite.
Let's talk about inspiration because I am a very visual creative. So I see things when people tell me story. I see scenes. So I just saw you walking in Venice, and it made me think about something we mentioned before we start recording, which is it connects you with your grandmother too, with the soundtrack, right? The music that he used to give flavor to a certain scene into a movie.
That is a great question.
And I love that.
That is a great question. I think that when you grow up in a certain environment, and in mine it's music, sonically that something happens to you. And they've proven that classical music, ups your intelligence a few percent. And I think that what happens is that you become so saturated with the sound and also the timbres, the colors, the meaning of the sound, the construction of the music. I'll give you an example. So, because our cultures shape us, and I'll show you what I mean. In the East, the 5-note pentatonic scale, da 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 da. That's pretty much the basis of their repetitious music. But in the West, that's not what occurred. What occurred was a form that permeated all of literature and all of music. It's called exposition, development, and recapitulation. Exposition is in music exposing or playing the themes. Let's say it's an A and B theme. Then you develop that theme. They go on a journey. In literature, it would be like presenting your characters. Then they go, down to Bath in England, or they go on an adventure. Then they come back, recapitulation, and they tell the tribe, or they have learned something and they have changed from that journey to being a different person. The hero's journey is another, the same idea. Mm-hmm. So it's not, so in Western music, that music is developed. Real Western music is developed. And what does it mean? I go, it means that it creates a story, just like what you're talking about here. Yep. It creates a story that changes the storyteller as well as those who hear.
I love that. It inspires and to connect it again with the music. Sometimes I've seen people, on Instagram or YouTube play this experiment where you watch a suspense or a mystery movie or a horror movie and you take the music away. It's not that scary anymore.
Right. It's not that dramatic. It's not that dramatic anymore. Yeah.
And you're telling a story. And again, I keep going towards your, thinking your grandma inventing the situation where maybe Houdini is simulating that he's late and he's not coming alive. What is she going to do?
Right. Well, I
is she
think
going to go up the scale there or lower?
Marco, I think you're absolutely right. And I also think that those chord structures got into me from my grandmother, and therefore, in some way, I'm reflecting them.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more as we get towards the end, but I don't know, maybe you can come back and we can keep having this conversation because I'm having a great time, and I don't know, maybe you can even play something if you want to. Your kind of music, my question for you is that we know that you play and you adapt and you transcript classic and score. Wizard of Oz, one of my favorite story anyway, ever written. What other kind of music a classical guitarist likes?
Sure.
What is that inspire you other than that?
So originally, the Spanish masterpieces, Bach and so forth, Segovia. But then as time goes on, I said, okay, how many more versions of Recuerdos de la Alhambra do we need? I've already recorded it. How many more versions of Leyenda? How many of the Chaconne? I've recorded all those. So now where do you go? Well, I wanted to add materially to the repertoire of the classical guitar because it's not that I don't love the Spanish masterpieces or Bach. I do. On the other hand, I am an American. And so how much American music is adapted for the classical guitar? Not that much, right? Very little. So I set about doing American folk songs, for instance, Duke Ellington, who, that's jazz pieces there. And he's, my grandmother worked with him, by the way, too.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, she was older and he was younger. Is that right? I think so. And because he was in those same venues or in that town. There are many places people don't know about in America. I go, well, Kansas City was a big jazz place, and there are many areas like that. Just like Haight-Ashbury was a big psychedelic music place, right, for Jimi Hendrix and so forth. Yeah. I have a couple Jimi Hendrix stories too, but we'll leave that for next time.
Okay, sure. Make a note for that.
Yeah.
You went into Duke Ellington lately. Well, I listen a little bit of everything, except for, I'm not going to go there, but there's certain music I can listen.
I know what you mean. I know which one it is, too.
If you want to make a guess, I'll tell you.
Rap.
Exactly. Yeah,
I know.
I like the initial.
They've got one part down. They've got the rhythm down, but now they have to have melody and harmony in order for it to be considered music.
And the original rap was beautiful. I mean, I could see something in that. The first hip hop and all of that.
Yeah,
I
well,
don't like the one that
the
there
kids
is
wanted
now.
to learn music, and they had taken all the music out of the schools and music courses for the youngsters, and so they had to find a way to create. And I laud them for that. I think that's great. I go, well, what were you supposed to do? If you didn't have a violin or a bassoon or something, what do you expect them to do? They want to make music.
Yeah.
Don't you want to have your kid do that? And also, it's a way out of poor circumstances. And I admire anybody that gets out of poor circumstances.
Yep. Yeah. But I was gonna get also into the adaptation of playing music in a different way. I want to finish with that, and I want a little bit your opinion, although you already kind of went there. But I was going to, when I was saying all the kind of music that I like, I've seen Guns N' Roses, Metallica, and I can listen to, jazz and blues and all you want. But lately, I'm really much into the standard of jazz, and my favorite is Thelonious Monk plays Duke Ellington.
Right.
And I don't know what you think about that, but Thelonious
I think it's great. I think it's
known
great. And
for
I've got,
going crazy
as well
places.
as the Duke Ellington stuff, I do George Gershwin stuff. So I think it's wonderful, Thelonious Monk doing that. And I think all of it is great. And Duke Ellington was a fine human being, too. People don't know a lot about him. He was a Freemason. He was a lot of things. I go, he was a very fine human being and gave a lot of people. That Satchmo was raised by Jewish people, and he was Jewish. People don't know that. I go, well, he was raised by them. And I go, he became one of the big stars of that era.
It sure did. Yeah, sure did. So what piece of yourself, as the last question, what piece of yourself you put into the music that you play? I mean, as your persona, does it change depending on the mood that you're in when you play something, or there is more of a standard?
I think I try to feel what is the intention of that music and try to communicate that to the audience. And yes, I have technical mastery, and you have to have that to play, right? I mean, of course.
Right, of course.
But on the other hand, it's all about the feeling and what's communicated. And to me, that's what music is all about, because I really believe music can heal people that are ill. I know that's true. And I can tell you a quick story, because I know we're getting off here.
No, please,
but
take the time.
Yeah, a quick story that when I was in India and I was playing at the National Theatre in Bombay, they call it Mombasa now, and I was playing a concert there. And a man, I found out later from a letter that was written to me and my manager back in California and one in New York, had two of them, that he had come into the concert and he was going to kill himself. He had suicidal thoughts, and he said, after I hear this concert, I'm going to go, jump off the bridge or whatever he was planning. And he did not do that. And he wrote me a letter saying that concert had healed him enough to save his life. And the top of the letter said Shanti, which is like peace and, that idea. And so I honestly believe that music can heal people that are disturbed. It doesn't matter your economic status, rich or poor, middle class, doesn't matter your physical status. I go, that music speaks to humankind in a way that nothing else does, and is a very unifying thing.
It's very much a universal language. People say it's math, and I know that music is also math, but right? So it kind of get connected. That's why
right. Well, it's
music.
ratios. It's ratios. But when Pythagoras started dividing the strings in order to differentiate pitches, and that there are mathematical ratios involved in that. Yes, that's true.
That's very, very crazy. And the story that you share, it tells a lot. And I mean, I'm only imagining the way you must have felt when when you read that letter? I mean,
yeah, and my manager looked at me, and we were sitting in his office, and he said that was worth the whole tour. And I said, exactly.
and it gives another whole perspective to what you do. And to end this, I always like to say that if this conversation inspire somebody to go out and pursue their creativity, write their story, become better storyteller, or grab an instrument and start playing, great. You can be a master, and you can be somebody that just play for fun.
Yeah.
But if it's inspire you to create something, I think we did a pretty good job in in sharing this. And if you, with your concert that time, you inspire people, someone in particular, and probably many other to do other things, but saving someone's life.
It is a mystery as to why one person. It is a great mystery. I saw a concert by Segovia when I was 16, and the die was cast, as the saying goes. The fire was ignited. And it is a great mystery of why one person wants to become that thing. He wants to create that beauty himself. The technical mastery is one thing. The beauty of the music is another. They're melded, of course. And why is it that one person says, that's what I want to be, and another person is enjoying the music? Both are great. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, what is that? And people ask me, I go, I don't know.
No, something magic about it.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I wish I knew the answer.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. Well, I think it was magic in a way. The things that we talked about, 35 minutes went away, and I had a really good time. I hope you did.
Enjoyed it. I loved it. You're a great interviewer. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I hope that the audience enjoyed it as well, because they need to stay tuned to subscribe. We have a pencil down that you can come back, and we can talk a little bit more about music, and that will be fantastic.
Hey, I got a lot of stories about Wizard of Oz. We've got to remember that one, and the Jimi Hendrix ones. Ask me next time.
Okay, Wizard of Oz.
When I transcribed Wizard of Oz and the Jimi Hendrix stuff. I've got a few stories about Jimmy.
Yep, a while back, a few years ago, I went to see the costume. It was an exhibition for the Oscar in Hollywood. I used to live in West Hollywood, actually. And and I saw the original shoes.
Right.
Shoes,
I think they're in the
they used to be
now.
gray. They used to be gray. I don't know if you know that.
I think they're in the Smithsonian now.
That may as well be. There was it just blew my mind just to see a piece of history like that. So definitely, let's talk about that. All right, everybody, stay tuned. There'll be a lot of all the links to get in touch with you, your app, and your LinkedIn, other social media that you want to share will be in the notes. So everybody, stay tuned. Jonathan, thank you so much. It was an honor to have you.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Audio Signals Podcast, hosted by Marco Ciappelli. If you learned something new and this conversation made you think, then take a moment to rate this show and add it to your favorite podcast player. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and share this episode with your friends, family, and colleagues. We invite you to come back for more stories and follow Marco Ciappelli on his social media as he continues musing on stories, storytelling, and storytellers.